Did you know that 25 acres of cover crop can remove as much carbon from the atmosphere as removing one car off the road? So, I would rather see fields of grain than miles of traffic. Now today I would like to persuade that the Minnesota legislature should fund farmers towards agriculture or best management practices. I am passionate about soil, land, and water conservation, so I've done the research to give you this information today. I have a small garden and I'm studying environmental science. Now, the reason you should listen is that climate change affects us all. If we can all come together and work together, we can work towards a cleaner, healthier future for us all. Now, my first argument I'd like to present is that Minnesota is behind in our emissions goals. We're supposed to be reducing our emissions by 80% from 2005 to 2050. Now, this is a huge goal, but it's absolutely attainable with our resources that the government has. So, according to the environmental research scientist Peter Cebrowski, in an article he wrote with other authors in 2019, Greenhouse Gas Reduction was titled, and he says, we can reduce our overall agriculture emissions by 5 to 10% if we implement these agriculture best management practices across Minnesota's 20 million acres. Now, we know that agriculture emits greenhouse gases, and so we can do our part via carbon sequestration. We can take carbon out of the atmosphere and store it in plants. So according to my visual aid, plants pull the CO2 from the atmosphere during photosynthesis and store it in their biomass. And then it decomposes, and then eventually it's still in the soil, so that good soil organic matter is still there. It's not lost. So carbon sequestration is very important here. Now, according to a Land Stewardship Project article, this is farmer Luke Peterson. He testified February 2021. He says, agriculture doesn't need to be a carbon source. It can and must actually be a carbon sink. So we can sequester the amount of carbon needed to mitigate the climate crisis if we come together. So he's not wrong. We do need to do something about this. Now, what are agriculture best management practices? According to the article by Peter Cebrowski, The Greenhouse Gas Reduction, the 3 best management practices are riparian grass buffers, cover crops, and biochar. Now, firstly, it's a commitment to the land to do better. The USDA defines biochar as black carbon produced from biomass sources like wood chips, plant residue, etc., to transform it into a more stable form. Carbon sequestration. It's how we can save it, how we can store it, and keep it in the soil and not in the atmosphere, contributing to the climate warming. Now, biochar can increase the soil nutrients and it can increase plant productivity. So now that we've sort of covered Minnesota's emissions goals, we can move on to the number of emissions that come from agriculture. So the number of emissions that come from agriculture, forestry, and land use total are 22% of Minnesota's state level emissions. Now 2/3 of that come from crop residue, nitrates leaked into our surface waters, and farm equipment, petroleum-based fuels that also leach into the soil and into the water. So, let's see. This are your riparian grass buffers, and this is the nitrate levels in Minnesota's waters. So nitrates are actually harmful for fish and aquatic life. They lead to a dead zone down in the Gulf of Mexico. So Minnesota is home to 10,000 lakes. You think protecting our waterways would be one of the top priorities. It's very important because nitrates leach into the water. All of our water goes to Mississippi River, which then goes down to the Gulf of Mexico, which contributes to our dead zone that is happening. Now, fish, according to the Nature Conservancy, these nutrients trigger algae blooms that choke off the oxygen in the water, making it difficult or impossible for this marine life to survive. So if we can implement riparian grass buffers, cover crops, and biochar, we can work towards a clean future. We can do better. Now that we've covered the number of emissions from agriculture, let's talk about how this will be funded. So they've actually already put a budget proposal out in April of 2021. The Land Stewardship Project has worked together with other people, and they put this budget out according to this LSP article by Amanda Kohler in 2021. Minnesota State and House has finalized their separate budget proposals for the Board of Water and Soil Resources and Minnesota Department of Agriculture. So this proposal was to establish a soil healthy farming goal of 30% of Minnesota farmland to include cover crop, perennial crop, no-till, or managed rotational grazing by 2030. That was a quote from the article talking about what the proposal entails. The proposal also wants to include the funding in future proposals. So we actually ended up getting was from the Minnesota Board of Water Resources and the Minnesota Clean Water Fund, ended up getting $5.35 million. They originally had asked for $11.2 million, so they actually got, less than half of what they asked for, but still a really good amount to fund farmers towards these agriculture best management practices. So in conclusion, we have covered our Minnesota's emissions goals, the number of emissions that come from agriculture, and how to fund this. So we can actually continue to put these proposals into action. We can make our voices heard. We can have this, there's money out there to be spent as long as people know how important this is going to be. We need to put this money towards something important here. So we need to continue to put these proposals out. So we've covered the number of emissions and our emissions goals and how to fund this. Now I hope that legislature can pass these proposals and they start to understand how important it really is to take this action. Now, remember that it takes 25 acres of cover crops to remove as much carbon from the atmosphere as one car. So if you think about that and how much of a difference that can really make, I mean, Louis Armstrong says, it's a wonderful world. So we have the power to make that happen. Fields of green, red roses too. We have the power. The Minnesota legislature has that power as long as we keep making our voices heard and keep these proposals going. Put it in the budget. Thanks for listening, and you guys have a good one.